just quickly, I'm going to give you a little overview of who we are, and then I'm going to talk about some of our ideas about new types of partnering to move things forward. I really come from where Steve Whiteman comes from. Unless you get a drug approved, it's never going to help the kids or the patients. So I want to get into some of the hardcore realities and maybe how we can address them. We are developing the drug that Dr. Bachman talked about earlier today, DFMO. We call it CPP1X. It takes out this enzyme ODC. It was developed for a lot of years for cancer, many failed trials, but there was an unprecedented signal in a precancerous condition, preventing polyp recurrence or adenomas. And our philosophy as a company is go upstream, have a war on precancer before you have 50 man-eating tigers in the room, go on the roof and look out 2 miles and try to pick 1 or 2 of them off. So that's our paradigm, cancer risk reduction. We have our own set of challenges. However, the drug, oh, and by the way, no oral formulations are currently marketed, approved. It's being sold, it's being provided for compassionate use by Sanofi in very high-dose IV formulations that are not appropriate for the things that we're looking at. So we've got an orphan status for neuroblastoma and for FAP to try to give this thing a shot. Because without intellectual property, it's tough to get investors and partners, et cetera, to move things down the road. You saw Andre Bachman's talk. I'm not going to go over this, but beautiful science, fantastic rationale for why this might make a difference. And we got involved with Giselle. Giselle came to my partners, Dr. Frank Maskins and Gene Gerner. And it was pretty tough for us to say no. That's not why we started. We're trying to reduce colon cancer and significantly, but the evidence is so compelling here. The problem is such a big problem, and we felt like we had to do it. So somehow we've been able to bootstrap providing the drug, regulatory support, and integration into the consortia's strategy. This is just a quick overview of where we are. If you put this drug into the context of a real FDA development program, there's a phase 1/2 going on. It's a small trial, okay? You guys are funding it. We are supporting it, and we have a lot of work to do. If we do things right and the drug really pans out, and they didn't talk about the clinical results yet, but anecdotally, it looks really, really promising. And anecdotally means the trial's not over, and this is what some of the early results are. We need to define the registration pathway. So these are all the things that Steve was talking about, Dr. Whiteman was talking about, that the FDA is going to require. We need to define the resource requirements that are based on that FDA registration pathway and get to a business plan and see how this could get funded. I do want to share one bit of very interesting science that came out of our phase 2/3 clinical trial on adenoma recurrence in the polyp former population. This is a little complicated, but this is the molecular diagnostic work that's come out. The target, the ODC target, has 3 different alleles, 3 different genotypes. And we have found that in 2 of them, and this is a little tricky, but this is a benefit in our context, so lower is better with the treatment. And these are the main side effect with the drug, which is ototoxicity. We found that in these 2 of the 3 alleles, we saw all the benefit and really no difference in side effects. In the one AA allele, which is 5% of Caucasians, as far as we know, based on the research today, we saw a reversal of this. So it's very exciting for us, some insights here, that by screening out this group here, we can make a difference. And we hope that our neuroblastoma research friends can follow up on this as well, and I think we'll do that in our trial. So we have a lot of exciting prospects, but we are just at the beginning. Resources, FDA reality, these are looming issues. So I want to shift gears and just talk about some ideas to brainstorm with you all. You know, how can biopharma companies and nonprofits coexist? How can we thrive together? How can we get new therapies to patients? So this is the continuum of the drug development pathway that you've seen a lot. There's a lot of work in the early parts of this. There's hardly any in the late parts of this. And I want to talk about some of that. Disease-based foundations are, you guys are seeking treatments and cures. You provide research funding and advocacy, patient access, a lot of the things that companies really need to be successful. Biopharma companies, we may have drugs in development for non-orphan diseases or non-pediatric diseases. We do have an FDA focus. We have a focus on the hurdles that you got to get over to get a drug approved, and we do have a desire to help. But we also have limited resources, and as Nancy pointed out, shareholder responsibilities, you have ROI responsibilities, et cetera. Can we create new types of partnerships really to focus on FDA registration-directed pathways and trials? I think so, but FDA approval has to be the top priority. And again, I side with Steve. If you want therapies to get to patients, you got to focus on that. There are a lot of bricks in the FDA wall. This is a tongue-in-cheek slide, but this is really what we deal with all the time. I've been grappling for over a year trying to get them to agree on a registration protocol for a colon cancer risk reduction trial. We're 98% of the way there, but there's a lot of this yelling, I can tell you that. Whoops, sorry. Takes a lot of collaboration to get through this wall, and people have done it. Steve Whiteman's punched through this wall. Lots of collaboration is required. You got to hit this head on. We tend to be ostriches sometimes and stick our head in the sand, but it doesn't get us anywhere. We got to hit these things head on. One thing I've noticed is the funding that comes from nonprofits typically is not used for rigorous FDA-focused programs. All right, and this is really busy, and I didn't mean to go through this whole first bullet point, but these are some of the realities. So the endpoint definition, the stats plan, the duration of the trial, the monitoring, the clinical pharmacology package, which is a huge stack of studies and paper in its own right, how things are going to get reimbursed and into the marketplace, all of these kinds of realities, they have to get really through the FDA hurdle. The other problem I see is that clinical trials that are designed by academic groups and well-intentioned, even cooperative groups, do not really have this type of discipline or focus either. And I'm not going to ever tell anybody who said that last quote, but it is a real quote from the head of a very large NCI-supported cooperative group, who's about to embark on a very large, very long trial that's a phase 3 trial. And why aren't you making this a registration protocol? By doing a few extra things, interacting with the FDA, going for a special protocol assessment, et cetera. So these are some of the things that we have to deal with. They're tough realities. We all know them. Expensive development programs, in addition to the regulatory environment being challenging, and this ROI skepticism. So someone's got to step up and push these things forward. We need some new partnerships. Is there a way for private companies and disease-based foundations to get together? Private companies have the agents, they have the IP, they have the regulatory focus and rigor, they can manage the process, they can deal with all the supply issues, all of the ancillary work that the FDA needs before they're going to ever approve a drug, the pharmacology, the safety, other data, and the market commercialization issues. Disease-based foundations maybe can start taking their life in their hands a little bit more if the funding is there. I mean, they're putting money into research anyway, so how about some for the FDA-focused trials? And I'm not talking about a phase 1-2 trial. I'm talking about a SPA-approved special protocol assessment approved. You interact with the FDA, they buy in, and then you do it. Clinical trial recruitment, patient registries, these are really important because, as Steve pointed out, with clofarabine, you got accelerated approval. You have all these follow-on studies to do. The advocacy groups can really help here, and I'll give you some examples of how this is already happening. And also with the commercialization activities as well. The goal has to be a new drug application, but also upside sharing. So let's get you something back out of it. There are some legal realities for nonprofits, but you can do program-related investments. These further your purpose, but for something that might not attract a typical investor versus a merit-based investment, which is where you're putting your portfolio. The PRIs are an exception to the jeopardizing investment rules. And there are a number of forms that they take. Some you see interest-free or below market rate loans, guarantees, equity investments, royalty sharing. And there is a trend toward this mission-influenced investment approach. So this is where you get 2 bangs for the buck. Hopefully you get some return on your dollar, but you also further your programmatic goals. Here's a few examples that have been very successful in terms of bringing companies and industry and advocacy together. The Muscular Dystrophy Association has a number of programs from early stage research into corporate grants, and they get something out of it. They expect cost matching and they have royalty sharing programs. The Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation has set up an industry drug development partnership, and they used to do nothing in terms of FDA kind of focused drug trials. Now they do about, well, a couple years ago it was 10% of their budget, so this has to be updated, but it was $16 million. But they keep IP rights, they fund early R&D. If they get something, then they out-license it to a company, and then they fund the company and get equity. So there's an example that they've done there. Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, my personal favorite. If you go to their website, it looks like a drug company. They have a pipeline chart with all the things they're supporting and putting it in the context of an FDA registration program. And they do some really big grants. Discovery through phase 2 clinicals, to do registries. They also keep IP rights. They get a multiple back on their investment if the drug's approved. The Multiple Myeloma Foundation, same thing. They do a lot of hands-on work. They do support target validation and the biorepositories, genomic screening, but they also coordinate translational work. They have their own CROs in some cases and facilitate corporate partnering. They have arrangements with 3 or 4 big companies pushing things forward in some drugs that are relevant to their indication. So these are some examples of what's really happening out there, and I think pediatric oncology, rare children's diseases, continue to band together and create some critical mass so we can do these kinds of things. This is my last slide, and since I was coming to Michigan, I thought I'd better find a Michigander and get a quote. So this is by Lee Iacocca. I have to keep telling myself this. There are a lot of challenges, but there's also some great opportunities here. How many orphan drug prospects really are out there that have never made it to the light of day because of these different hurdles up there? Can we connect disease-based foundations with pharma companies, sort of a mechanistic Match.com, so they know something about the mechanism? What about all these other drugs that are already out there? Some sort of formal approach to do that, and define novel joint ventures where we make the ROI equation a little bit easier for a venture capitalist to swallow or a big pharma partner to swallow, where we can put in the things that we both have, money, advocacy, patient access, et cetera, and all the expertise to move something forward. But I think I would recommend having guiding principles being registration-focused development. And that's the only way you're going to get new products and new therapies over to patients. But also upside sharing. It's perfectly legal, it's perfectly kosher to do that. So those are some of my thoughts. Thank you very much, and happy to talk to anyone further after the